Hi folks, you're with Tassless Today, your pushback channel, and thank you for joining this audio radio live stream. In this essay, I'd like to talk about the relationship between higher education, university education, or even any post-high school education, your college, technical colleges, that sort of thing, and the relationship between the amount of people with higher education and the national wealth of any nation. So now, I don't think it's escaped anyone's notice that over the last 40, 50 years, there's been this stupendous increase in college-educated citizens in the West, and at the exact same time, standards of living have been declining. I mean, you could almost plot it on a chart, and as for every new college kid, that extra college kid, or 1% increase in the amount of people with a university degree, that the standard of living of the West drops by 1%. I mean, you could almost the correlation is just absolutely clear. The more college graduates we've got, the lower our standard of living, the less purchasing power in the paycheck, the more expensive housing and accommodation and food and energy becomes. So there appears to be almost a direct relationship that the more college kids you've got, the poorer you become. Certainly that's the case of the West. Now, the West comes off a high point, of course, in terms of wealth. I mean, just to give you an idea, in 1970, more than 2/3 of the world's wealth was held by the United States, the Western countries, Western Europe, that sort of thing. So again, we've got 15% of the world, less than 15% of the world's population having more than 2/3 of the wealth. That's how much wealth was concentrated in the West. Now, the more people that have got college degrees, the poorer the West becomes. So maybe it's inverse. Maybe the relationship is that for every extra college degree holder you get, the country becomes poorer. Now, I should go back to when I graduated to college, to university. Something like 3% of the kids that started high school went on to university at the time. That's how few people went on. Now, there were a lot fewer courses then. There was no such thing as black studies or lesbian studies. There's none of that sort of stuff existed then. But nonetheless, it was 3%. But the standard was very high. Not only did you have to strictly pass or fail, meet the standard, but also once you were at university, if you failed, you had to why are you failing? Why are you taking a place in the university here that could go to someone else, or you're wasting your time and ours by being here unless you're a serious high IQ student. So you had to appear before a committee, and I had friends of mine had to do this. One guy, his mother died, and that affected him, and he flunked the test. And the end of year test in I think he was doing mechanical engineering off the top of my head, but anyway, he had to front this sort of show. He had to show cause committee where why did you fail? Why did you come short? And so that's how exacting it was. And around 30% or 1/3 of the kids who started university dropped out. It was just too hard. They couldn't hack it. They just couldn't. They weren't prepared for the amount of lectures you had to attend, the amount of reading you had to do, the amount of study, and so on. They just couldn't. Some of them were just there for they just wanted to party and that sort of thing. And especially some of the universities that were less demanding in terms of pass marks, where they didn't have things like medicine and engineering, where they were more towards the sociology side of things. I know guys that used to go to those universities just because they knew there'd be a lot of chicks there and there'd be a lot of partying, that sort of thing. They weren't seriously there to study. So about 1/3 of the students that started will drop out. So you had something like a 2% of the people this is in Australia, had university degrees. They took a broader view of things in the US. Sociology was a bigger thing there in the 1960s, but that didn't really come to Australia until, say, the 1980s. And that affected universities all for the worse, I believe. So, and of those, the 2% that went on, very small number went on to do things like masters and PhDs. And I remember if somebody with a PhD walked into the room, they were treated with almost reverential awe. Wow, someone with a PhD, you must be really fucking smart. Not like today where every black lesbian you come across has got a PhD. So what's that relationship between education and wealth? Is there one? Well, there must be one, but now we look at, say, countries like, say, Argentina or there's other, say, in some Eastern Europe now, where university education is free or paid for by the taxpayer, and so you get the issue, the phenomenon, if you like, of the professional university student, because they can go to university for free, but it's in a poor economy that doesn't generate jobs, or doesn't generate many jobs, and certainly not well-paying jobs, then you have a situation where students from the better off families will just become professional university students. So they'll start in university at 18, at 35, they're still at university and they're on their third or fourth or fifth degree, or their second or third masters or whatever. And because they come from reasonably well-to-do families, they don't need to work. They can live comfortably with their folks, and they can be provided with a car and enough money to go partying and all the other stuff. So they just become professional students. They've actually got no intention of working. They're going to hang around in university doing useless degree after useless degree until their parents die and they inherit their parents' house and their parents' wealth and so on. So now in other countries where the education is supposedly free, it's again monopolized by the wealthy classes, where again you get the professional university student, or in corrupt places like India and elsewhere, the kids are just there to find a wife or a husband, or to just swan around, befitting in behaviour befitting their social status and the class they're born into, and think they have the right to just live in this delusional pretense where I'm a university student, I'm studying to become a PhD and such, but in reality they don't study or work at all. They just bribe the lecturers, and the lecturers aren't paid very well, so they $5,000 from a wealthy family to make sure that their son or daughter gets the PhD, and it's money well spent. It's very prestigious. My daughter has a PhD from the University of Ouagadougou or something like that, and they go, oh wow, and that's considered socially prestigious, and again given the class of people they come from. So obviously holding degrees and free education and lots of people having degrees, that's not where wealth is coming from, quite clearly. For example, when there were 2% of degree holders in Australia, the working population of degree holders, then the purchasing power of the paycheck was 3 times what it is today. Now there are 40% of the population of degree holders, nearly 50% now. Then the standard of living is down to 60% less than it was when there were only 2%. So clearly there's no relationship between the amount of people holding degrees. So we come back to the issue of merit and rigour. Rigour was at all levels of the education system. Was it a perfect way of doing things? Well, no, of course not. But it was rigorous. When you got to 15 years old, the high school would come to you and say, listen, you're a fucking hopeless. They wouldn't use this language, of course. You're a fucking hopeless student, and you're wasting your time here. You don't give a shit. Go out and get a job. Learn a trade or something like that. And but even the trade schools were quite rigorous, and they wouldn't pay. Even in trade schools, there were kids were going to learn, I don't know, to be an electrician or something, and a lot of them were getting kicked out of the course, saying, look, you haven't got the IQ to do this. You're not applying yourself yet. And the training was different in trade schools. We didn't per se have to understand what you're doing. You just had to be able to repeat a process and go through a process. But if you couldn't pick that up, then you weren't going to get the trade, and they wouldn't qualify you as you wouldn't become a certified electrician if you couldn't pass the course. So rigor was at all levels of high school. You either graduated or didn't to university, even going from year 11 to year 12 in senior high school. If you didn't pass the majority of your tests, then they would just tell you, leave, you're wasting your time. So these were the things that we go. So we come back to the merit and rigor are what creates wealth in a society. As long as any society is corrupt, as long as corrupt upper class people can appoint their wastrel children into the jobs and into college positions and into prestige positions, and as long as there's a pursuit of prestige for a certain class of people, and they monopolise then all the key appointments, the key jobs, the whatever, then that's a sign of a degradation of society. And today in the West, of course, we've got this fixation with appointing and giving degrees and PhDs to black lesbians, and giving black lesbians jobs as presidents of colleges, and all these sorts of things. So merit and rigor have been completely removed from pretty much all jobs, all promotions, all hirings, all college degree, anything that smacks of any sort of prestige, of any description, has now been completely had merit and rigor removed from it, and it's handed out on the basis of affirmative action and political correctness and so on. So this is as a guaranteed killer of wealth as anything, and that's where the West is today, where it's actively and aggressively and purposefully and willfully destroying its own means of creating new wealth and having true value in the system. And once value is removed, and it doesn't matter whether it's intrinsic value of share prices, intrinsic value of real estate, intrinsic value of education, intrinsic value of hiring, or the intrinsic value of promotion and rewarding, it doesn't matter. But as soon as you extract or remove that from the process, then you're on a route to disaster in terms of loss of wealth creation, reduction of wealth creation, or indeed elimination of wealth creation. So the number of people that hold degrees is close to relevant, but the rigor of any sort of education. I would look at a paper, a history paper, let's say, that I did in graduating from junior high school to senior high school, and I would argue that paper, that exam, is far more rigorous than a master's degree in history at a university today would be. That's the extent to which rigor and merit has been removed from the system. It's changed to a point where everybody has to get a participation trophy, and there's no merit or rigor anywhere to be seen, and that's killing our wealth and killing it quickly. Until merit and rigor is brought back again, then we will continue in the West on this downhill slide. Being attached to us today, your pushback challenge. Thank you for listening.